makes you decide, just jumping into it, to get a PhD in media?
Honestly, for a long time, I wanted to be a professor.
Mm-hmm.
And originally, I wanted to be a professor in English. But when I did my undergraduate degree, I did a double degree. So I did one in English and fine arts and digital media specialization. So I kind of combined all these different forms of communication. And when I did the digital media specialization, funny enough, I was looking at different forms of communication and came across Nicki Minaj's Pound the Alarm music video. And that represented my Trinidadian roots. And it was the first time I saw a mainstream artist in America and slash Canadian media representing Trinidadianness. And I was in awe. I thought, to see and be empowered by an artist that can do that and make me feel that sense of excitement and national pride, that was something I wanted to explore more. So I actually started with Nicki Minaj before I started the Drake studies. And that's what eventually led me to study the marketing and brand strategies of Canadian R&B artists.
Why Canadian R&B?
Because I get a sense of belonging when I listen to that music. In Canada, we had so many artists in the periphery of society, of Canadian society, that didn't get recognition. And that included anybody participating in quote unquote Black music. That could be soca, reggae, calypso, R&B, hip hop. And I found that when all those artists collaborated together, they created this mixed genre style of what I call contemporary R&B music, which is kind of that mixture of all those cultural sounds and styles. So Canadian R&B has a special place in my heart. It has a lot of Caribbean immigrants that work together to push that sound of Canadian R&B slash hip hop music into the forefront. And that's the music that I find we're celebrating and exporting today as Canadians.
So when you look at, for somebody who doesn't know what Canadian R&B is, what would be an example of Canadian R&B, like maybe in the mainstream eye, that people might be able to, kind of cross-reference?
I would say Jessie Reyes is one of the case studies I looked at for my PhD, and Jessie Reyes does a great mixture of like I'm talking about, that mixture of hip hop, R&B, and pop music, and that's what I categorize as contemporary Canadian R&B music. The Juno Awards, they recently split the traditional R&B category into contemporary R&B and traditional R&B. So when you think of that traditional R&B, the more bluesy, soulful, kind of slow jams, that's the traditional side. But then the more contemporary side has that mixture of pop.
Nice. Now, for those people that haven't got a chance to kind of tap into what you do, kind of give us a broader outline or a more better perspective of what you did with comparing Drake and how his career, because I thought it was very interesting how you took, him being Jimmy from Degrassi, which I love that show, by the way, and then connecting it to, it didn't just organically happen like someone would have you believe, like how he kind of put all of that together. Because I want to delve into that. So let's start there.
Yeah, well, the PhD dissertation as a whole looked at how Canadian R&B rose to mainstream media. So I looked at how many generations before Drake kind of paved the way for him to access. It could be anywhere from the studio recording sound booths to just the networks that many of these artists created before him. So when he entered the scene, there was Maestro Fresh West, Michi Me, Shaw Claire, lots of artists before him that gave him the networks or gave him free studio time to be able to record. Socrates talks about that as well. And not only did he get to tap into those networks, but because he had his fan base out of Degrassi, those fans, he brought them over to his music. So back then he was using MySpace and Blogspot, which seems kind of ancient now, but that was the the way
that was the thing back then.
That was the way, that was the Instagram of the time, right? So he brought over that audience to listen to his music because he had that fan base already. But then he also, for example, his father, Dennis Graham, was in the music scene at the time as well. So when he'd go visit Dennis, he talks about pictures of him sitting on his lap playing on stage. So he had access to these networks. But I do argue that because he was Canadian, because he was biracial, and because he was a television star, he had a lot of points against him. He was challenged for his participation in this R&B hip hop genre style. And he cites Kanye West, for example, as already starting that genre of the mixture of hip hop and R&B, that singing, rapping kind of style. So he was building on those works, but having that social media access is really what helped him push through, because he got access to somebody called Jazz Prince, and Jazz Prince came across his MySpace page. And then Jazz Prince, his father was working in the industry, and he himself wanted to build his own talents. So when he came across Drake, he's like, hey, that's somebody I want to work with. That's somebody I want to build up. And the two of them worked together. He then got to go on tour with Lil Wayne, all of this before he signed. So he did have all those networks before he actually signed. And I think I would speculate, of course, I'm not in his, his marketing team or anything like that, but I speculate he waited a little bit longer, although he could have signed earlier, just to say he was an unsigned artist, to kind of break some of those barriers. And that's obviously more marketable as unsigned artists. So.
Right. And since we tapping into Drake so much, how did you feel about that, what was that interview that just happened with you, what is his name? Isan Bay now? Mos Def? And he was talking about how he doesn't feel Drake is hip hop, he's more pop.
Yeah, well, that's, I actually found that hilarious, because in my dissertation, actually cite Drake saying how Hotline Bling was supposed to be pop, but it was pushed into a black music genre category because of his identity. Yeah. So I think we still have these tensions, national and racial, of how we categorize artists based on the genres of music that they are predicted to play or assumed to play. And I think my definition of contemporary R&B as a mixture of pop, hip hop, R&B blurs those genre lines as well. So I wouldn't argue he's not pop, but I also wouldn't argue he's not R&B. He's that, genre mixing, blurring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was my thing too, because when I was watching that interview, I kind of was like, damn, like, how you not going to give Drake his props? And he's done so much for hip hop.
Yeah.
Like, he's put so many people on, a lot of people even say, like, in a lot of their songs and a lot of their speeches, like, oh, I wouldn't be doing this if it wasn't for Wayne, Drake, or, Kendrick, or anybody, some of these other great artists. So it's like, it's kind of sad on his end, because Mos Def is a, great hip-hop legend in his own right. But it's like, damn, how you not going to give this man his props, when he's done so much for hip-hop already?
No, 100%. And I think that it's super important that we recognize, too, the assumptions that people make based on someone's racial and national identity, what kind of music they should be playing. But I do believe that, like I said, he does that mixture, that in-between genre style. So it becomes a little bit complex when you're trying to push them into one genre category when they do this genre blending, yeah.
So now you mentioned, like, he used the internet to connect himself to Jazz Prince, to, which introduced him to Jay Prince, out here in Houston, where I am. Organically, how does an independent artist, based on your research that maybe doesn't have the fan base of Degrassi, really tap in to position themselves to even get noticed by people like that?
I think that the best way to do it is just get in front of as many people as you can, because you never know who that one key person is going to be that helps you break in. So Drake aside, I looked at how Justin Bieber and Jessie Reyez also broke into the music industry. And I found that, Justin Bieber had one key player, Scooter Braun. Scooter Braun decided, he was eager to build talent. He had just signed Asher Roth and tried to build up his career. So he was looking for more talent, came across Justin Bieber and decided to invest in him and try to build his career. Jessie Reyez met Mauricio Ruiz. And Mauricio was also looking to find key individuals to build up their careers as well. So I think what I found is kind of the through line with all three artists is that they found key individuals to help them break into the music industry. So I think that's the most important thing. You never know who's watching. You never know who you might run into at an event. Just always be there and you might find that right person.
Right. And I guess that does make a difference. So you look at, like, the flip side of the music industry and what they say that it takes, that these people are going through to maintain it, from the the over-sexualization or the accusations of rape and everything. What percentage of that do you believe is true?
In terms of the stories?
Just, like, you look at Diddy, for example, and everything that he's going through, and then you look at the stuff that they say that happened with Usher, or you look at what's going on with Kodak Black. Do you feel like this is something that happens once they get involved more in the music industry, or do you feel like this is part of what makes them sign? Because in my mind, I feel like the music industry chooses the right people that they feel like they can exploit in order to gain the best capitalism opportunity that they can. But some might argue that it's their talent, but talent is not really necessarily as important as marketability. And they're creating organic markets using the right algorithm. And that's what makes it so interesting, that we could all go back and forth. What are your thoughts on that?
I think, to be honest, I can't speak to specific individuals. I don't know their histories. I don't know their kind of legal backgrounds and what exactly they got involved in. But I will speak to something Jessie Reyes publicly created, a music video and a mini kind of film, as well as a song called Gatekeepers. And that discussed what it was like as a female in the industry, having faced many problematic situations where she felt like the advances were coming towards her sexually in order to break into the industry. So she said, for example, someone said they could build her career if, you know, she had slept with them. And so I think that temptation is there for a lot of artists. And what she said was she didn't end up going through with it, but it was that inner struggle that she faced, because she knew if she did it, she might have that chance. So I think a lot of artists face that internal dilemma where they know they can do certain things to break in, but is it worth that risk? Or, you know, is that something they want to partake in just to break into the industry? So I think that exists, and there's a lot of insidious parts of the music industry that people have to be aware of when they're trying to break in. And it's a real factor, especially, you know, if you're a minority woman trying to break in. Like Jessie Reyes had a lot of complexities that she had to face to make it in the industry. So I do believe it's there. I mean, you hear Disney kids talking about, you know, breaking into television and having faced a lot of those scenarios as well. So I think that if you're a young artist, you just have to be careful in what you're doing.
Very, very careful. Where do you see yourself making your mark, or, you know, raising your most significance in the world, Dr. Amara? Like, what do you feel like you want to solely contribute to the world and make a difference? Or leave your mark?
Yeah, I think it comes from having experienced my parents face that immigrant struggle in Canada and seeing them face racism, having a hard time. You know, we didn't, you know, they were working class. We didn't come from a lot of money. They moved to Trinidad. They tried to create a life for us. And so that's both the passion behind what I want to do, as well as where I want to make my mark, and just creating a Canadian space, an American space, just a broader environment where we accept one another for our differences. Because I was born in Scarborough, Ontario. I was surrounded by a lot of immigrants where I was raised, and then they moved us to Amara, Ontario, mainly because they could afford a house out there. It was in the middle of nowhere. It was the countryside. When I say countryside, it's not just small town Ontario. It's predominantly Mennonites, horse and buggies, farmland.
Oh, wow.
Very, very small town. So we were known as the brown family in the corner house. I was the only brown girl in school. We were very different. I had classmates ask me, did you tan a lot, or were you born like that? They were so mind blown. It was confused because this was before social media, so they didn't get to go on their phones and access, you know, diverse people. Mainstream media in Canada only showed white people, so they didn't understand. They were like, what?
How do you respond to that, though? Do you analyze?
It was innocent ignorance, so I didn't take it personally. I even went home and I was like, Mom, we were born like this, right? I was in grade 2, you know. I was like, I'm pretty sure, but it was just so I think that the biggest mark I want to make is just creating that sense of understanding. It doesn't have to be, you know, I'm not going to convince everyone to accept everybody for who they are, but just create that level of understanding where we can have conversations, where we can have, you know, silly discussions, where even if you're confused about people being tan or brown, like, you can have that dialogue and have that education. So that's where I want to make my mark.
Do you think the world is really ready for, you know, because that's a big dynamic.
It is.
You know, because now you're leaving me to interpret, like, what you said and how I present it may be offensive to you, and it may not be offensive to you. Like that, you know, you could have taken that very offensively, and it could have gone completely left, you know, their ignorance. Yeah. And then the same token, it's kind of like how I'm going to say it may not be how you were culturally raised to receive it. And that's the thing. Like, I would have never guessed that you were from, you know, that you had Trinidadian roots. Right. I mean, I see it because, you know, my 19-year-old daughter, her mom is from Trinidad. So now I can't unsee it. Yeah. You know, when I think about my first time going to Trinidad and thinking, like, please, God, don't let that gecko fall on this bed because I'm going to die. But the gecko never fell. But I think about the great times. I think about the shark and bait. Yeah. I think about the beach. I think about the sweet, sweet TNT. Oh, me loving the country. That and the dollar dance and stuff like that. I won't do the dollar dance.
Oh man, I had to. We pulled that out at my wedding the other day, and it was a riot because I married an Italian, and they didn't know how to dance to soca music, or they didn't ever heard the dollar wine before. It was a good time.
Yeah, my daughter's baby shower was like nothing Like
Oh,
I got
love it.
so wasted, because it's like I had never experienced something like that
Yeah.
before. Like it was a real party, and eating the palau and the
Yeah.
doubles and the curry, the what is it? The roti,
Yeah.
the dolphin roti and
And
stuff like
caloric
that. I even ate,
and stuff.
yeah. I
Yeah.
even ate some maniku
Oh,
until I found out what it
okay.
was. No, that's not okay.
I would ask,
That's not
ask what
okay.
that is.
Oh
What
my
does it look
God,
like
Because
that's
instead
they
of
was like, this
rice?
is
funny.
just some extra curry. It's just a little chewer. And then
Yeah.
somebody said, oh, you're eating maniku? That's rat. And I'm like, what?
I can say I've never tried it, to be honest. I grew up
You
with
ate right.
palau. I grew up with curry duck and
Yeah.
curry goat, but never
Yeah.
had maniku before.
That sounds intense. I don't think I want to try that. That sounds intense. I'll try everything else, but
Yeah,
yeah, that.
I get it. I get it.
So how often do you get to visit Trinidad? Since I know you said you try to get to your Trinidadian roots and everything like that.
Yeah. To be honest, because of the pandemic and such, I was supposed to go and then I didn't get to, and then school happened and life happened. So the last time I went was 7 years ago, I think.
Oh,
It was a
okay.
long time, or actually it was a little bit more than that. But the last time I went, it wasn't for a visit. I actually went and I taught at a school
Oh,
in
sweet.
Arima for a semester. And I taught Form 4 and Form 2, and I taught English and art, actually, what I was studying in my undergrad. And it was great because it was the first time I had visited Trinidad where I wasn't really a visitor. Like I stayed for a couple months and I got to experience the culture. And I think that was really important for me to do, because otherwise you'd be going for weddings or funerals or, just there for a week or two. So to be able to live and breathe Trinidad for a couple months, it was definitely different for me. And I felt like that was the first time I could be like, okay, I'm a proud Trinidadian.
How did you go back?
I didn't feel like a visitor
Yeah.
anymore.
That would have been hard for me to go back home because it's such a different
Yeah.
life and a different culture,
Different pace.
and stuff. Yeah, just different, just everything.
Mm-hmm.
The beaches are beautiful. The people
know.
are like very, very nice.
Mm-hmm.
Remember the first time they was like, "You want to come take a bath?" And I'm like, "What do you mean?" But it's like it was like a little
Oh yeah.
thing that they built outside or whatever, But it's just different. It's different than America.
Yeah.
So looking at your page, I saw that you're doing some TED Talks.
Yeah.
How did you get into that? And, that's something that I've always wanted to do.
Mm-hmm.
So for somebody that's looking to do it, how do you manifest yourself into that space?
To be honest, I'll give you the quick version, but during my master's degree, I wrote my first academic publication on Drake, and it was Simon Fraser University that published it. And that looked at Drake's branding and marketing strategies to represent different identities in different music videos. So what I argued that he did was represented, his Jewish roots in one, his American roots in another, his solely Canadian identity in one, a big high class identity, low class identity. He was trying to represent all these different identities siloed in different music videos. And in that way, he appealed to so many different demographics that I think helped catapult his career. His audience, his fan base grew because of that. So many people could resonate with his different stories. So I published that academic paper after presenting it at different conferences across Canada, which was amazing. And when I did the academic publication, luckily enough, the Toronto Star picked it up, as well as Daily Hive and Toronto Life, and interviews snowballed from there. And then the TEDx speaker who was organizing the event reached out to me and he said, hey, would you like to apply and speak about, your academic career as well as your study on Drake? Because this was 2016 when I published it, like his new album had just come out. Everyone was talking about Drake. So it just happened to be a good time. And again, getting in front of the right people. I had no idea that, that paper, those interviews, he had read the one in Toronto Star, and that one interview is what led to that. And so funny enough, he emailed me and I didn't reply because I thought it was spam.
Yeah, because it's like, what am I doing so significant that the TEDx person, reaches out to you like, no, this got to be fake.
Like, this isn't real. Like nobody does this. So then he reached out to me again, and then I asked to actually get on a call to verify, because also make sure you do that because it could be spam. So get on a call with somebody, and then we chatted about it, and then it was nice because it was actually back in Kitchener, and that's near where my parents live. And at the time I was living in Vancouver, so I had to fly back, and it was a nice time to just spend some time with family too. So they got to come, and it was an amazing experience. Yeah, I really enjoyed it.
And so when we talking about scams, I just want to touch on this for a second. How do you feel when, different labels reach out to independent artists that say they're looking for, independent talent and artists and they're willing to pay? How do you feel when they say they want to charge you to listen to your music first and then get back to you?
I mean, every label has different structures. I would say it depends on what you want to do. Like, I think the biggest thing you need to do is try to book a meeting with somebody before you send any money to anybody. Just make sure you get face to face with somebody. You have a contract in front of you. You can verify who they are through LinkedIn or whatever kind of platforms you need to use, because people could make up anything online. You never know where they're coming from. So if you can verify, do that double check. Like I said, LinkedIn, the label's website, if they're listed on there, do all of those checks before you then decide what you want to do. But again, it's just, if there's a payment structure, it's dependent on what you want to do with your career, if that's the path you want to go down. But as long as you can verify them, I think that's the most important thing.
Because I just feel like, when labels reach out and say they're looking for talent and stuff like that, it kind of not rubs me the wrong way, but it kind of makes me feel like, is this a scam? Or, should I send my money? Because it's like, you never know even though it's like $35, $50, you never know. Like,
you still don't know. You
still never know. You don't
know where the money is, is going to.
That's why a meeting is harder to fake if you actually get face to, and it's a video call. I always suggest Zoom calls, FaceTime, whatever it is you need. So then you can kind of see what their environment is, and you can kind of tell when somebody's a little shifty on a video.
That part.
That's why I can say it.
That part. So when you look at just marketing as a whole, like you have social media marketers, you have digital marketers. From the client's perspective, what should the overall objective, be? Because sometimes you can create a marketing plan for somebody and you get them the impressions, you get them the leads, but then they feel like you didn't do what you're supposed to do because they're not converting like the fans did for Drake. And how would you explain that to, like, if you had a client or just somebody that wanted to understand, like, I hire a marketer and I get the leads, but they don't convert into a better ROI. Break that down for us, if you will, just in your understanding of marketing, because I think a lot of people get that confused. They think like, okay, I hire you to market and I pay you thousands of dollars or hundreds of dollars. Now my lead base should be jumping up. I should be in business and we should be high-fiving and drinking pina coladas on the islands. But it doesn't necessarily work that way, because as a marketer, you can't determine if somebody's going to convert. That's your product base. It's really about, I can draw in a bigger lead pool of potential people and give you the impressions, but I can't guarantee the conversions. Nobody can.
Well, I don't do any freelancing or anything. So the marketing I've done has been purely industry based. So I'll work for different companies, and that's in branding, marketing, or communications. And so currently I'm the marketing manager of a global telematics company in construction. That's essentially the cross between tech and construction. So I'm helping them sell hardware and software. That's like the easy way to say it. And so right now, what my goals are as a marketing manager, we set OKRs. So we set specific goals. Like, for example, within the last year, one of my goals was to set 10,000 followers on LinkedIn for their company. And we hit that goal. It was great. But then that's an objective that I knew I was trying to hit. So that wasn't about conversions. That wasn't about a certain type of audience. It was just 10,000 followers to gain that exposure. So I think that's the biggest thing if you're in marketing. It's also hard because you might have struggles. Like in the past, I've worked with other companies where they didn't want to invest in marketing because they were purely sales or finance. And they were like, well, where are the ROIs? What is the point of getting brand awareness? Like, I can't measure that. But I think the biggest thing is when you have certain quantifiable objectives, like the 10K followers, or you're going the other route and saying brand exposure for the pure premise of just getting in front of audiences, that's another way to do it. But you can't mix the two, because there's no way you can convert brand awareness to I want this amount of followers. They're two different objectives. So I think that's the biggest thing you can do is if you're working with a marketer or you are a marketer, you come up with shared goals. And then that sense, you can measure them, you can see if you hit them or not.
So how do you, with your current, current role, how do you get them to value the KPIs that you develop that are going to be the most successful?
We work together. So because I work with a company, we work together on this is what their goals are and this is what I realistically think we can hit. And usually it's above realistic expectations, but then, you know, it's a good push. You see if you try to get there. And I think that's always a good thing if you're the marketer, to have those internal goals for yourself that are kind of beyond what you are offering, to then just, you know, try to surpass what you were expected to do. That's always fun. Yeah.
In your professional opinion, what do you feel like COVID hurt businesses, or do you feel like it helped them? I feel like it pushed them to realize, like, okay, we don't necessarily need the overhead of a brick and mortar.
Mm-hmm.
And now most of us, you know, we can get sent that same productivity, allowing people to freelance or to work at home.
Mm-hmm.
But then at the same token, it showed us, okay, we need a better digital presence so that our business is just not.
Yeah.
When something comes in. What are your thoughts on that?
So in my PhD dissertation, I looked at, like I said, the rise of R&B and then the 3 career trajectories of Justin Bieber, Drake, and Jessie Reyes. And when I looked at their career trajectories, I looked at how they broke in and what they were doing now, like in the contemporary space. But what I didn't plan for was COVID to hit right when I was conducting my research. Well, that was like a whole other spin on what I was doing. And it ended up being great because it was a optimal time for me to look at their digital marketing strategies, because tours were canceled, all in-person interactions were limited, so they were forced to use the online space and they all 3 of them released new music during COVID. So I wanted to look at how they marketed that music, how they released that music, how they interacted with fans. And I also conducted interviews with 35 music professionals and marketing executives, many in the States, many in Canada. And I looked at what marketing trends they were doing at that time. And overall, they all stated that COVID was an adjustment period for them, but it also helped them accelerate their digital marketing strategies because they were forced to do so. So I think that although, you know, it did affect a lot of small businesses, for the larger companies, they had to find ways to access that large audience and keep growing that audience. And musical artists were kind of the exemplary of that. Justin Bieber, Drake, and Jessie Reyes used different strategies. They heavily relied on brand partnerships at the time to generate revenue. They did a lot of live streams, whether it was on Instagram, whether it was on YouTube, and they had sponsored concerts online, on TikTok or on YouTube. So that, I think, enabled them to also give an intimate look into their day in the life as well. I looked at how all 3 of them were posting more stories on Instagram. That could be like snippets of, they're still curated, of course, but snippets of what they were doing in their everyday life, whether it was professional or not. And so I think that was a really great way to create a sense of authenticity to relate to their audiences. So I think it just changed the way people marketed themselves or shifted their branding approach. Like Justin Bieber shifted from, you know, this heartbroken guy, or not even heartbroken, but like a playery kind of personality, to this devoted husband, just because his marriage was happening at the time. And then he could show these intimate snapshots of him and his wife at home during COVID. So I think it definitely shifted the way people branded themselves as well.
That's a great way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and Play the Renegade and I go back and forth with that all the time. One of the key things that I like that you said was the vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
You know, deciding how you're going to be vulnerable, because most of us aren't used to sharing those intimate things about ourselves. One, because we don't want to be judged. Sometimes we don't even realize that these are key things that people connect with us on. But that vulnerability, when somebody can see themselves in you, it makes them want to connect more, because now I don't feel isolated in my thoughts. But that's a hard thing for a music artist, because you look at music as a whole, and I'd say, in my opinion, it's like 70-30, maybe 30% of it is like really who you are, and 70% of it is exaggerated because you want to sell records. So how do you find that pivotal point of vulnerability when, you know, because nobody wants to glamorize being fake. And that's a hard thing.
It's funny because that was one of the biggest tensions I had when I was looking at the dissertation, because I predict, you know, Justin Bieber switching from, again, this kind of playery personality to, or heartbroken personality even, to then this devoted husband. And I wondered, you know, how much was his actual marriage and how much was a marketing ploy, because you just never know what is staged and what is quote unquote authentic. And a lot of the time, these artists have so many people behind those teams that they have, of marketing people, of lighting, of everything they have in their homes, that are staging it to look like this is just their everyday life, when really this is a very staged shot with a specific branded product right behind them. Right. So I think that was something I discussed throughout the dissertation, that I am not able to state for a fact anything that I theorized was a marketing ploy or their everyday life, but I provide some evidence and suggest, I think that this, for example, was a marketing strategy because of XYZ, and then this might have been a real intimate slip up that they provided on their Instagram. So yeah, but as a viewer, unless you're on their team or unless you're that individual, you'll never know. You'll never know.
Right. So when you say with these market employees too, how authentic do you think these relationships are that these celebrities get into a lot?
A lot of what I found, I had cited a lot of different television personalities, and many just do date for the publicity. Many date, like if there's a movie coming out and you see all of a sudden the two main characters are dating and wow, this is real chemistry on camera. A lot of that is a marketing ploy. Like some of it even stage them going to the grocery store together. There's so many weird little tricks that they do to play with the paparazzi, to play with their audiences, to build that story that you see on television. But again, you'll never know. Maybe they are a real couple. Maybe they're staging it. You'll have no idea.
So when you take that and, and I saw that when that movie, I think it's called Neon on Netflix, where they were trying to, I think that's why I got sucked into that, because it's like, man, do people really have to go through this? But when you take it from like an independent artist who doesn't have the budgeting, who doesn't have the resources, or really just is an artist, they don't see that the music industry is 90% business and 10% talent. How would you suggest they start building that marketing strategy for success in setting short-term goals? Because you can't set a macroscopic goal like I want to be rich. You got to set milestones to get to that point and be more intentional in what it is that you do. Like how you said, I want to have 10,000 followers. That's something that realistically can happen. But if you say, okay, I want to increase my revenue by 2 million, well, that can't happen overnight.
Yeah.
Why? Because there's so many different things, so much research and development that you just, you can't understand it all.
I think the biggest thing you need to do is, like you're saying, break it down goal by goal. Like, for example, in my career, I didn't know where I was. I had goals, but mini goals, but I didn't know exactly where I was going to be 7 years ago. I didn't know what I was going to be doing for a career, but I knew I wanted to be creative and in marketing and finish my degree. So I think having those mini milestones to get there is the best way to do that, and not being overwhelmed by the great goal or strategy of trying to be famous, because I think that's the biggest thing, or trying to be popular. Knowing, like, for example, you want to focus on specifically Instagram, you want to build that platform and that audience, and even targeting, like I said, platform wise, because you could say you want X amount of followers on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, whatever it is you want to do. But I think that's also really hard to accomplish. So I think targeting one platform, targeting a specific number, and then going from there. Or if it's music, for example, and you want to say, I want to create X amount of songs before the end of the year, try it that way before you're trying to say, I'm going to do a whole album in 5 months. Like that, I think it's just building it block by block is the best way. And that's related to music, but also if you're doing whatever other career you want to get into.
Well, this has been a great interview. I feel like you've touched on a lot of different things, and just the fact that what I ultimately admire is that you come on and you show that you're a real person too. So many people that have accomplishments, they feel like you have to come on and be like this astute, pretentious person. Everything just happened, and it just happened, and it doesn't work that way.
No, but that's the thing. I feel like so many people that make it in leadership positions or become popular, they don't show the way that they got there because they want to be put on this pedestal and untouchable. But to me, that's not how other people are going to get there. You want to build a legacy for other people to also climb on. But I appreciate that. Thank you. And also, we comfy out here. I'm wearing some fuzzy socks, there's no French in this.
Got my USC Trojan hoodie on, right? Well, not hoodie, but
I don't think he can lift his foot up to the steering wheel, and start parking.
I'm not going to lift my foot to the steering wheel first, so
I can. But that's awesome. Yeah. That's awesome. I want to wish you the most success in your career, and I will end with this last question. Okay. When you're creative, your brain never stops moving. Yeah. How do you find that work-life balance? Because I heard you mention husband. How do you find the time to where you're spending time with him and you're giving him your attention? I struggle with that. I feel like I'm spending time with my kids, but I'm thinking about this interview that we're going to do. I'm thinking about this video that I'm going to be filming. And it's like, I can't just hit this button and shut my brain off and just stop. But at the same token, I want the people that I care about, which is very few, to feel like they're getting a part of me that the world doesn't get. And that's the hard thing for me. How do you do it? Give me some advice, Doc.
I think that is a struggle so many people face. Even if you're outside the creative realm, we live in a very fast-paced environment. It's very demanding, whether even just having a cell phone on you all the time. You can be reached. You can be distracted. It's very easy. The best way I would say to have a work-life balance is to allocate your time that you're going to do your work and schedule, like meeting-wise, the time you want to have with your family and friends, because I think that's the best way to do it. Otherwise, friends and family could be neglected, and you might, have a really long work day and then not get to your friends and family. So I try to shut myself off, whether it's right after work, before dinner, make my dinner, have time up until a specific like 9 p.m. at night. Then I'm going to work for a little bit for like an hour and then hang out again or go to bed. That's my plan. So it's always like a allocated time every day that I can spend with my friends and family.
Okay.
So now, Doc, that was some great advice that you just gave this man. You need to charge his ass now, because that wasn't free.
So, and we appreciate not only your contribution, to the music industry, but just showing up and giving us a different perspective of life,
Thank you.
So I want to wish you the most success in your career, and we hope to do this again sometime. And before we let you go, where do you want people to follow you on social media?
You can follow me right here on Instagram at DrAmaraPope, Dr. Amara Pope. And that's my handle on essentially every platform: Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, or LinkedIn. So feel free to follow me there. And then you can also visit my website. It's www.DrAmaraPope.ca.
Oh, man, I want to be a doctor. Dr. Senior 5150.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, it took 7.5 years to get there, but we got there.
Well, maybe I'll just be happy not being a doctor. I was 7 years.
Across this whole hope, see her 7 years, like, ooh.
Yeah, I got it. That was just the 1 degree, man. In total, it was 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Yeah, 12.5 years.
Jesus.
Ooh.
I was in school for a long time.
But it paid off.
Yeah.
It paid off.
Yeah.
Not only it gives you conversation, it gives you, accolades and everything, and that's really what's important. But it just gives you that little mark that no one can take away from you because you've earned it. And that's what the most important part is. So you two kids, you guys can be somebody like Dr. Amara Pope, but you have to have a strategy. You have to have a plan. But more importantly, you got to have the discipline and the energy to show up even when you don't want to. And that's the hardest thing to do for all of us. We make it look easy sometimes, but it's not really. We'd rather be on the beach, drinking a pina colada or enjoying doing nothing.
I get it. I'm having my tea right now. I've got my comfy socks on. This is like, you got to show up even when you're super tired, because you have these great conversations. Right. You never know where they go. So seize every opportunity in front of you.
Absolutely.